I'll smile
Deep
live,
breath.
live in 10 seconds. Well, hello everybody. I am so excited to be with you. I'm Tash coming. Usually it's Kyle, but he's on papa duty tonight. He's looking after the kids while I get to have fun here with a very special guest. But first, I'm going to start off. This is the You Asked For It segment. We have put on this segment on Wednesday nights to address the questions that you have asked. I know it's a plot twist, right? And I love the things that have come out of our community, the big questions. We've covered end times, we've covered things about worship, we've covered really wonderful things. And tonight we're going to cover a topic that is extremely close to my heart. If you are a friend of mine and you know me, you will know that politics is probably one of the things that I spend most of my time speaking about. Something that I really, really love, and it's something I'm very passionate about. So tonight, I couldn't be more honored with the fact that we have Wendy Francis here tonight, who is the director of the Australian Christian Lobby for Queensland and the Northern Territory. It's like I'm standing in celebrity presence. For me, this is what it's like. Wendy, I'm just going to I'm going to gloat a little bit about you tonight. I want our viewers to know who they're speaking to tonight. But you have a beautiful story. But here, I'm just going to read currently that you serve as a director and board member of Samaritans Purse Australia. And as we speak tonight, you'll find that because of this position, there's actually a lot of things that have influenced Wendy in a really beautiful way. She has a husband, Peter, and he's the principal of Malyon College in Brisbane. They have been married for 39 years. That's amazing. 3 children and 10 grandchildren. And to quote Wendy, she says, "My family is my greatest earthly treasure." So tonight I want to welcome Wendy. Welcome, Wendy Francis from the ACL. How are you tonight?
I'm really good, Tash. Guess what? We've been married for 41 years.
Oh,
So I
41.
need to update that on my bio. And trust me, if you have tackled end times, tonight's going to be a breeze. I don't know if there's a more difficult topic than end times. So we're on a good topic tonight.
That's so great. I'm so excited. Well, let's get started because I am anticipating tonight to maybe run over a bit of time because there is so much to unpack. If you follow anything with politics, even if you are an avid watcher of mainstream media, you will know that there is a lot going on in the world. And I think sometimes when there's a lot going on, it can make us very fearful. But tonight, I'm hoping that we can break down a few things, that we can address some specific things to get some answers on, and to bring clarity in our role as God's people in this tonight. So let's start tonight. Wendy, how did you start down the pathway of politics? I know it's not the thing. You're a 6-year-old girl and you ask, what do you want to be when you grow up? And you said, I want to be in politics. I don't think that's everyone's answer as a child. But Wendy, what made you, what were the things that happened in your life that made you pursue this?
So I was always very passionate about justice. I was always very passionate about what was right and was wrong. I grew up in a really very precious Christian home and a strong focus on what was right and what was wrong. We had also a strong focus on missionary work, so I was aware of what was happening in other countries. But the politics side for me really started when I was working at Griffith University, and I was a manager of a research centre at Griffith. And the research centre was looking into the effect that outdoor spaces have on our sense of well-being. So in that research, I was admin, so I was a manager. I wasn't in I wasn't an academic, but our academics in the research centre were looking at things like graffiti or Indigenous artworks or statues, things that are in our public spaces and the effect that they have on our sense of well-being. So if graffiti comes, particularly in a park where young mums would normally go, then the young mums actually avoid that park for a good length of time. The park then becomes habited by somebody else, a different clientele, sometimes not a friendly sort of group. It's amazing what a difference just a small piece of artwork can make. And so at the time I was having my grandchildren, they were starting to come along, and I was seeing the very overtly sexual billboards and advertising, particularly in our shopping centre malls. And it just connected with my head that, if we're worried about outdoor artworks, then this is a real worry because it's going to affect my grandchildren. And I started getting angry about it, to be honest, Tash, because I was feeling like, you know what, my grandchildren are being groomed to have an appetite for inappropriate content from the time that I'm pushing them in the pram. And so I started making a complaint to the people who owned the billboards. I made a complaint to the advertisers. Every time I did, it came back to, this is not against the law. This is not against the law. We're not breaking any laws. And so I just thought, okay, we've got to change the laws. And so that was the start of me into politics.
Wow. It's amazing how much children change everything, right?
Yeah,
You think about things,
absolutely.
you wouldn't have thought about before. That's beautiful. In your time with the ACCL, I'm making up words
Yeah.
here. What are some of the wins that you have had where your efforts and the efforts of the ACL has or have had an effect on legislation?
Look, we've had various times when there's been a really good win. We've also had a lot of losers too, losses. And I'd have to say that there is a war going on, and we know who wins the war. And sometimes in a war, there's battles that you win and battles that you lose. We've had some really good wins in the space of sexual exploitation. We've had some good pushbacks on legislation. For many years, we were able to hold off the abortion legislation here in Queensland. Me and others, there's other groups as well, as Cherish Life, there's Family Voice, there's a number of different groups. ACL is the second largest political lobby group in our country. So we're talking significant numbers, and so it does make a difference. But as we know, we've lost that now in Queensland, but we are in the ears of the politicians going to the next election, and there's still some hope there. So we have... I think there's a number of different ways that we've been able to be salt and light, and the numbers really help. Yeah.
Yeah, that is amazing. And you're so right that it almost feels, in not a discouraging way, but the battles are becoming quite big.
Yeah, they are.
And I don't know if it's a what they call it, a sign of the time, so to speak, but this is such an interesting time to be alive as a Christian in particular.
Yes,
And
I agree.
we are so honored to be a part of something that actually speaks up, whereas some shrink down. But I wanted to, for everyone watching, I did want to preface this segment with, I think, probably the whole point of this whole conversation. I think it is so pertinent in this day and age. So, Wendy, in regards to Christians and those who are watching, Christians in Australia right now, in our government and the political spectrum, why is being involved in politics important at all?
It's a great question, and a question that many Christians struggle with. Many Christians will almost have a difference between, well, the only thing we need to do is just to preach the gospel. And I would say to that person that it is not a full understanding of what the gospel is. So, we could spend all night just talking on this, but if I could just briefly say just a few points about this, because it is really, really important. The Christian worldview is reality. It is reality. The using our influence to affect the outcomes in our nation to flourish, that is that is what the Bible's all about. So, you know, in the Old Testament, we had people like Joseph and Daniel. They served in the government. And what they did is, as they served in the government, both of those men, you see that they used their influence to help their nations to flourish. In the New Testament, we saw Jesus not just caring for people's spiritual needs, but he cared for their physical needs. He wanted them to be fed. He wanted them to be able to have their diseases healed. In our day, how that happens is through our governments largely. The other thing I would say is that politics are unavoidable. You know, we live in a democratic nation where our politics are a huge part of it. But it's not just in our country, in Australia. Ask any pastor or church leader in a closed country who have to have an underground church, or any missionary trying to get into a closed country, whether they think politics are important. They will say absolutely, because we are citizens of the city of God, but we're also at the moment belong to the city of man. We have an amazing opportunity in our country because we have democratic politics, that we can actually have a voice. I think the other thing, there's a couple of other things. We need to, one of the big things that Jesus says for us is to love our neighbour. And the way that we love our neighbour is very practical. In a sense, politics is one of the ways that we demonstrate to our neighbour that we love them. And what I mean by that is, you know, caring for the hungry, the thirsty, the naked. This is all looked after in politics. And so Christians need to be part of that. Good government and the laws that come in from a good government are vital in whether our nation prospers or it thrives. You know, the government are the ones responsible for laws that protect unborn children. The government are the ones who are responsible for laws that protect marriage and families. They're the ones that are responsible for the laws that protect the vulnerable. Politics is a means for affecting great change, and it's because we love our neighbour that we're involved in politics. I also would say that government in Queensland, it's in a George Street, but in every state there's a place in our towns where in that place people vote on laws that are either for our good or for our evil. And we need to be part of that, because government restrains evil and it promotes good. You know, it was Paul who urged us to pray for kings and all who are in high places, and he wants us to pray that so that we will lead a quiet and peaceful life. So he wants us to pray for our leaders because they affect our lives. We can look back in history, recent history, but also more past history, and we see that Christians have been the ones who have lobbied governments and have worked for laws that have got rid of infanticide. They've got rid of the gladiator games in Rome. We're talking about Christians who have advocated for changes in this: child abandonment, human sacrifice, pedophilia and polygamy. These have been things in our past that Christians have actually lobbied against. The burning of widows in India. So we had people like William Wilberforce who fought against the slaves, and we all know his name. Slavery. So we're talking, even more recent in the 1960s with Martin Luther King, who led the civil rights movement. Talking about Christians who have participated in politics and have worked towards the flourishing of their nation. You know, Jeremiah 29, it says, you're to seek the peace and the prosperity of the city where I've placed you. And for me, Christians can't effectively do that without being praying and being interested and being participating in our democratic system. I think we've got an amazing opportunity in Australia, and we are very unwise if we don't take it up. I do understand why some Christians want to avoid politics. It's a tough area, and it can lead to unpleasant barbecues.
Yes, I think I remember when Trump got elected, and there were some magazines releasing articles on, I think it was around the time of Thanksgiving, and one of the articles was titled "How to Not Get into an Argument with Your Uncle Joe About Trump," and it's a very touchy topic, left, right,
Yeah.
centrist, you know, ultra either way. It is a very awkward barbecue. Um, but yes, very interesting. But you touched on something that my next question is going to go to. Why do you think, apart from the awkward barbecues and the tough conversations, why do you think Christians have remained silent? And I want, I just, I do want to choose my words carefully, and I will just say I am. My heart is for everyone. My heart is for
Mm.
you if you are watching. But why have Christians chosen not to engage in political arenas and chosen not to engage in legislating laws? I am specifically, and more recently, to remembrance, our national plebiscite on same sex marriage, and more regional, the legalization of abortion in Queensland. Why do you think that, Wendy?
I think it's from a false understanding of love, because every pastor and Carl and Tash, you do, but you do a great job as pastors. You know, I look at what you're doing on Facebook, and if your people are watching you now, I want them to look after you, because you're doing a great job. But pastors have got such a diverse congregation. You've got so many different people, and you know intimately where they're coming from. And so that there are people, that worship with you, or that are related to your church in some way, that have had an abortion. You know women who've had an abortion. You know people who have been hurt through divorce. You know people whose children have identified as gay or transsexual. And you know all of this. And so in a way, it's really easy to think, I will avoid that topic because I don't want to bring any hurt. The
Mm.
truth is that 1 in 4 women in Australia apparently have an abortion. That's very, very high. But the friends I have who have had an abortion in their life, they want the truth to be told. And I think that we're wrong if we don't speak the truth. And I think that we can do it in love, and I think we can do it with the right tone. The Bible tells us to speak the truth, but it tells us to speak that truth in love. And I think we're doing a disservice if we stay out of this conversation. It's unfortunate that it is a difficult barbecue topic, and I think we've got to foster the opportunity to be able to discuss things and walk away and still have the beverage of your choice with that person and sit down and laugh and talk. And I'm sure, Tash, you and I share a bit of a girl fan thing here, but I'm sure that you and I would have things that we don't agree on, but it would be great to talk about them. It would be great to sit down and say, oh, why on earth would you think that? Because it's good it's the whole iron on iron. So we need to be talking about these things.
Yes.
I think pastors need to develop a way of talking about them in love, but we are doing a disservice to our young people, particularly if we don't speak the truth from the pulpit, but also in the barbecues and in the youth groups, because the truth is what will set us free. So I would urge people to really look into things and know what you can say, even think beforehand. So when I was first starting in this sort of role, I tried to presuppose what people would ask me, and I would think of a way I could say it in a way that was not going to make them immediately put up a gate or a fence, or be offended, because I don't want that. I want to be able to speak to somebody in a way that they can actually listen and hear what God's saying, not what they think I'm saying, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. What would you say to someone who is watching or will watch, who perhaps is sitting on the fence, so to speak, on whether to engage, disengage, um, Yeah, well, I don't even know how you would even broach that, but I'm sure you've had many conversations with people who have either just not seen in the, ignorance is bliss sort of thing, but have had conversations with people who are interested but
Mm.
just not sure, and those who are interested but just have no clue on where to start. What would you say to them?
Yeah. I'd say it doesn't matter if you don't have a clue where to start. Just start listening to people and start engaging in the conversation and asking people. Asking people, well, what do you think about the upcoming election? What do you think about the child protection issues that are happening in Queensland at the moment? We all know that there's real problems with the child protection uh, department in our state. But is that anybody's problem, or is that part of a whole different cultural problem that we have? I don't think there's a right and wrong in many of these conversations. There's a finding out information. And if you don't know, don't pretend that you know, don't feel that you have to, because likely you're going to say, well, I hadn't heard that and someone else hadn't either. But I think, we've got to get back to what the word says about the really important issues. The Bible speaks to everything. The Bible speaks to everything, but then there's nuances that we can discuss together. But when we go back to the basics, let's find out what the word says. And so do your own investigation into the word, but also I'd encourage people, ask Carl, ask Tash is probably a bit more busy with the kids, so ask Carl. And he, what do you think, Pastor? What do you think about this? So but find out for yourself. Be somebody who knows what's going on. It's actually very rewarding when you feel like you know what's going on and you have an opinion. And also be prepared to change your opinion, because I think we're growing every day. I think mature people know that they're always growing and changing. So be prepared to change your opinion on things as well.
That's really great because I think, in something that I've always loved about you, Wendy, is you broach everything with such humility. And I remember a teacher I had in high school said to me, you can never win a fight against humility because there's no fight to begin with.
No,
And
yeah,
I really love that. And it's important to have that attitude when we approach these hard
mm,
topics, because you're right. We all know someone who's been affected. We all know someone who is a homosexual. For me, I have two family members. It's a very personal thing. We all know someone, or like, a child, or all of these, they're the issues of life. Of course, we know someone, but you're so right. It's all in love, isn't it? And it's knowing how to have that conversation in love. What do you think? And I don't want to go, dark or heavy here, but I think it's really important. What do you think could be the consequences if Christians continue to be silent in the political arena?
well, I think we can see what happens when Christians aren't speaking by the sort of laws that are being passed even now. If every church and every Christian in Australia had actually spoken up and voted in the marriage plebiscite, I believe that we could have seen marriage saved. In saying that, I also think that it's important to acknowledge that marriage as a concept in our country had been trashed a long time ago. We were fighting a losing battle because we allowed no fault divorce. We've seen probably similar divorce rates in the church as we're seeing outside the church. So there's a lot tied up in that. But I think if Christians had spoken up, we could have defended that. The onflow from that has been the whole gender confusion in schools for our children. There's a lot that has come out of that and still continues to come out of it. But with Christians not speaking up, it's when the abortion laws are there. It's Christians being prepared to speak up for against sexual exploitation. When Christians don't, we find that other groups actually step in, and they come in from a similar, so particularly I'm thinking of the sexual exploitation side of things. So you have really amazing feminist groups at the moment really pushing back on sexual exploitation. Now they are doing some amazing work, and a lot of their work I really applaud and can support. But then there's also a certain aspect that a lot of people in that group have been hurt by men, and they may actually really hate men. Well, a Christian perspective would never come from that position of hating men. And so our voice needs to be heard in that space. And when it's not heard, I feel as if there's a big chunk of what God's wanting to say that's missing. So God said in his word that we are to be light, and we are not just to be light, but we're to be on a hill. Like, we're to be like really out there. And the darker the darker the dark gets, the lighter the light will be, and the brighter the light will shine. And without that light, what we're going to see is just encroaching darkness, and our children are going to be the ones who suffer from that.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. It's not one of the questions that we had discussed previously, but something you said about the transgender I can't remember what the thing, but that anyways, the question here, I still have mum brain, everybody, please forgive me. The mum brain just stays forever. I'm pretty up to date with a few things, but I'll share with you, Wendy. I do get really discouraged when I see, something's finally being spoken of in Parliament. I think is it George Christensen? He's been wonderful in speaking up about things that people don't want to talk about. But then you just never see anything eventuate from them. I'm in particular thinking of the -18 website that came hand in hand with gender ideology. That's what you said. All this gender fluidity, safe schools from La Trobe University, and all these sort of things. Just when you start seeing some traction, or someone finally, hey, I'm going to open up Pandora's box, but then nothing seems to happen. You're involved, obviously, in that arena. What can you tell us? Are things happening behind doors? Are there things being pushed to save the innocence of our children, particularly with the Safe Schools program at the moment?
Yes, there really is, Tash, and it continues on. We've really struggled in Queensland. We've struggled uphill with our Labor government because they're totally committed to this gender fluid education in schools. But we have got a commitment from Jared Blay, who is the opposition's education spokesperson, and he has promised that if the LNP get in, they will remove all gender fluid education from our schools. So we've got a promise in writing on that. So that's amazing. So that's the sort of thing I do. I work with people to get them to actually say things that we can count on. But the other thing that happened just today, actually this morning, the Federal Health Minister, Greg Hunt, met with representations from the health departments right throughout the country, because there are a number of very eminent doctors and psychologists calling for an inquiry at the moment into gender fluid ideology and the particular increase in girls wishing to be boys. Historically, transgender people have been men or boys wanting to be girls. It's completely flipped at the moment, and the increase, the huge increase, is in girls wanting to be boys. There's a lot of people who are speculating on the reasons for that. But they met this morning, and we became aware of this meeting. The ACL became aware of this meeting last Friday. So we quickly put a campaign together, and a number of people who are watching probably even participated in this campaign. We put out a campaign with an email just saying, can you email our health minister, who is Stephen Miles? And we made an easy link, and people did that in their thousands. When I checked on Monday morning, it was over 4,000 people had responded to that. So that was Monday morning, and it's now Wednesday night. So I expect there would be a lot more. So that people power really helps, because the emails that we arranged through that easy one-click sort of thing an email went to Greg Hunt, who is the federal health minister, but also to every state health minister around the country. So, and those sort of things really do make a difference, because John Howard used to talk about the silent majority, and he used to say, you know, there's a silent majority in Australia. And then when Tony Abbott came along, he said, if the silent majority stays silent much longer, there's not going to be any silent majority. Which I think is very true. So when people talk out in their thousands, it lets the politicians know, okay, there's still a strong feeling about this. So that's just a couple of things. We've got a promise from the LNP, but we've also really working hard. Minus 18 is a diabolical website. There's a number of different programs that are still around, and we are doing everything we can to get them taken down. During the COVID-19, in the first week of COVID-19, when the education went online, and so we had Queensland's Education Online platform, I went on to see whether the Safe Schools stuff had actually gone online as well, because I was worried that the kids would be able to access it one-on-one instead of even having a filter, because many of the teachers even filter this naturally themselves, because most teachers are really good. Most teachers are really good and concerned about so they filter some of this stuff naturally, but if it was going to go directly from the platform to the children, I was concerned. And it was all there. It was all there. The gender fairy, the genderbread man, or whatever it was, genderbread person, sorry. And it was all there. So we did a campaign to the Education Minister, Grace, and that was taken down within a couple of days from the online platform. So those are the things that that we just need to keep an eye on it all the time. And how can we expect, you know, a young mum like yourself or other people they're doing normal jobs, you know, they can't be watching out to see what's happening here, what's happening there. And that's the good thing about ACL. We can keep an eye on what's happening and let people know.
Absolutely. That is such a win. I can't tell you how relieved I am. That's amazing. That's a great report. What I've heard this, not directly to me, but I've read it, and I like the comment section of Facebook. I'm a silent observer there. Sometimes I don't write anything, but I do like seeing the comments. Even on Lyle Shelton's page, I do sometimes enjoy a good old comment fest there. But how do you respond? This is a common one on Lyle's one. How do you respond when people throw the accusations of you're over the top, or you're over exaggerating, or, you know, that's not the facts, you know, where are you reading this stuff? And you know, you're just getting yourself worked up for nothing. What's the response to that? I could probably go on with that question, but what are your thoughts, Wendy?
It's really a good question, and it's an important question, because what it means is when we do state something, particularly on social media or anywhere publicly, we do have to make sure that we've got the facts. And I think we need to be really careful that we don't exaggerate, and we don't put any hyperbole on there, because it can be so easy to actually ruin an entire argument if we're just in any way exaggerating. And I think there's a temptation to sometimes exaggerate. I don't exaggerate on it, because I can just immediately provide the fact. So I normally, if somebody is doing that online and they've made a public statement about this isn't true or something, I put the link on there and I show them that, but I don't let them go on either. I'm pretty good at blocking, because I don't want people reading and being confused. I'm old enough to be a mother and a grandmother. I can block.
Yeah.
And but I do, before I block, I private message the person and say, look, I'm going to actually delete this because I really don't want to confuse people. And I think that this is confusing, because this is the truth and this is it. And so I show them. The other thing I do, if they're local, I ask them to meet me for a coffee, because many of these people, they get a wrong impression of someone like me, thinking, oh, she's just she's this tough-headed nut thing. Christian grandmother. And so I just say, meet me for a coffee, because, you know, you'll go away and you'll love me. I'll hug you and we'll be friends. Or I can't hug anymore, can we? But
No.
I like to try and meet people who think that I would be an enemy, because I think that's what Jesus would want us to do. And I don't want ACL just to be a club for Christians to get angry and to pat ourselves on the back and to feel self-righteous. It needs to be about the gospel. And this is what we were saying right at the beginning. This needs to be centered around the gospel, and we need to be speaking truth. And it's part of your kingdom come, Lord, your will be done here on earth as it is in heaven. This is part of what Jesus said for us to pray, you know, from the prayer that he taught his disciples. And this is part of it. So I want to take every opportunity to meet with people who might disagree with me, because I want to have that conversation, and I want to learn. Tash, I've met with people who are in situations that are so tough, and I want to learn, and I want to feel their pain. I want to understand it, because I don't want this just to be, this is right and this is wrong and that's all there is to it, because there's a lot of situations out there that are very grey. It's not necessarily black and white. Scriptures are black and white. They are truth and they are right. But there are many times when people are living in very difficult circumstances. And if we come across with just, this is right, this is wrong, do it, it can feel as if, well, you have no idea where I'm at.
Absolutely. It's the we're human, and the human touch in the age of the keyboard warrior.
Yeah.
It is so important, because when you meet someone in person, and I can attest that Kyle does this a lot, it disarms somebody, because you can have this impression of someone right online, you know, the way, even text messages, you know, sometimes you write a text message and there's no harm in it at all. You're just saying, hey, or just for example, I'm texting Kyle, hey, can you pick me up a coffee on your way home? And, you know, you're like, oh, how will that be taken? Oh, just write lol at the end of it, you know, just to make it lighthearted, you know, because you don't know how text comes across. But in the age of the keyboard warrior, I love that you take that time to meet with people. That speaks volumes. And I can just, again, you are my celebrity. You're just making yourself in stone in my mind's eye, Wendy. It's beautiful. Now onto a hot topic, the abortion topic. And I only recently found out via you that the LNP has promised, as an election promise, to amend some of the legislation which was put in by the Labor government. Can you extrapolate on that? Because I would personally love to know more about that.
Yeah, so that's fairly recent. And Deb Frecklington made a comment about it, so the opposition leader. But soon after that, I went to visit with Tim Mander, one of the MPs. He's the deputy opposition leader. And I asked him about this because I wanted to make sure that I got it right. And he clarified it for me and confirmed. And I do have links to this sort of thing too, because again, you were talking about, oh, you know, maybe you're, you know, exaggerating or whatever. Love to be able to send people links to all of this tonight. We can talk about that at the end. But the LNP have promised three things in regards to the abortion legislation. So the ALP brought in abortion legislation in Queensland that is some of the worst in our country. It provides no protection for the woman at all. I would say it's quite anti-woman as well as obviously anti-baby. But what the LNP have said is we won't recriminalise. So at the time that the ALP changed the legislation, abortion was officially a criminal act in Queensland. There were still ways that you could have an abortion, but the LNP has said we won't recriminalise. But what we will do is we will visit the gestational limits. So we will look at the gestational limits. At the moment, it is available to birth for virtually any reason. So they want to look at the gestational limits. The second thing is that they want to provide protections for abortion coercion. So when we were discussing all of this during the whole abortion campaign, the ALP kept on really denying that there was any issue with abortion coercion. at the same time, we had very high-profile football partners who were being coerced. We had a whole, I mean, it's very obvious that abortion coercion happens, but it's not just from the partners either. I think, sadly, parents have coerced their daughters, thinking that that's the best thing for them. Even Christian parents I know have thought, oh, maybe that's the best thing. Really, really sad. And so the other thing to say in our abortion conversation is that from you and I, but certainly from God, there's no judgment on this for anybody. Abortion, you know, I sometimes when I think about abortion, I think of the Sermon on the Mount when Jesus, he likened hating someone to murder. And some people say, well, abortion is murder and murderers should, you know, go to jail or whatever. I say, well, actually, Jesus really made it impossible for any of us not to be murderers, because I think we've all hated somebody. So we're all in this together. Oh, I shouldn't have said that. That's a real cliche now, isn't it? We're all in this together. How many times have we heard that? But so I don't want anybody listening and have had an abortion think we're singling this out as a bad sin, because there is no hierarchy in sin. But the LNP want to review gestational limits. They want to provide protection against coercion, and they also want to provide counselling. And again, when we tried to have counselling brought up in the legislation that's been put through just from the ALP recently, they denied that there was any need for counselling, that women knew their minds. But we have found that counselling is something that women desperately want, because they want the opportunity to have somebody ask them, is there anything we can do for you that would help make this, that we could help you have this baby? And so the LNP is not saying we're going to make everything right, but they have certainly committed to those three things. And I think it's a brilliant clawback on a very, very bad bill. So I'm excited about that opportunity to work with them on that. But of course, that's only if they get in. Yeah.
Absolutely. I wasn't planning on heading down this road, but I don't think I would be Tash coming if I did not, because if any of you know me, you know that my number one thing that I'm most passionate about is abortion and protection for women and children. It's not just because I have 4 of my own. It's not just because of that. And for me, it's actually a very personal thing. And I'm sorry to spotlight family here, but there are brothers and sisters of mine that are not here because of choices. And my mother was very young. And I remember, and I'm going to try not cry because I did start tearing up when you were speaking, but I really wanted to share this because this does come out of a place of love and not of judgment. And whenever my mum tells me of when she got pregnant with me, it was this absolute indignant thing that she would not abort me. And she knew it was God. And she was only 16. She was very young. Her and my dad, you know, on and off, you know, teenage relationship, you know how it is. And I remember my mum constantly telling me, you were not a mistake and you were wanted. And I loved you from the second you were born, whether, you know, your father was present or not. So for me, abortion is very, very close to my heart, because I know there are siblings of mine that aren't here because of it. But also I had a mother who was very strong to say no. And I'm very thankful for that decision. So I want to just quickly, has the LNP discussed what gestational limit they would introduce if they were elected?
They haven't specified it, but what they're looking at is the age of viability. So and that is still being debated as well. And of course, as medical science progresses as well, that age of viability is dropping. So we're probably looking at about 21 weeks that they would bring it down to that. That's what we're probably looking at.
Yeah, right.
Now, the hard thing is, because you and I would want no abortion at all.
Yeah.
So in one way, we're not championing this as, oh, wow, this is great, it's coming down to them, because every life is precious. But I think the way that people have changed laws in a wrong way has been incremental. It's been little bit by little bit by little bit, and all of a sudden, look where we are. So if we can incrementally pull those back to save babies, then I will do everything I can to do that.
Absolutely. And with the legalization of abortion, I know a lot of Christians who, just their argument is, oh, well, we're all made in God's image, so abortion should be illegal. But more than that, when I speak to someone about abortion, I come from a very scientific background, not really talking about God at all. Of course, there is intrinsic value in life for me as a Christian, but when it comes to the science behind life in the womb, was this something that was negated? Was it not brought up? Was it swept under the rug? I struggle to find that in 2020, where we can put cameras in the womb, where we can operate on children in the womb, that we still have people who think that children aren't alive. It just boggles me. Where's the facts, and why do some people choose to ignore them?
So I think it's really interesting what you're saying, because I think that argument has completely gone out the window. And in the days leading up and the months leading up to the latest ALP decision to legalise abortion to birth for any reason, that was not denied. They did not deny the humanity of the baby in the womb. They did not deny the science. What was preeminent, though, was a woman's right to choose what her own body. It's her woman's choice. So that's what actually won the day all the time. So it wasn't a denial of the science so much. So the terrible thing is that I think in the past, women were able to sort of almost think, oh, well, it's just a blob of cells, I'm not doing anything. And even then, there was still this lingering sadness. And your body also that has repercussions for your body. But now, I think that the rate of depression and different psychological effects that come after having an abortion is probably amplified because there is no denial of the humanity of the child in the womb. As you say, we operate on that child. The first picture that we see of most children is a Facebook picture of a scan.
Yeah,
and
that's right.
when that baby is wanted, that's their baby right from the start, often has a name or at least a nickname. And so that baby is definitely a human being right from that very first scan. And so I think it is now even becoming harder. And the abortion rate in Queensland, I don't know the abortion rate throughout Australia, but the abortion rate in Queensland is actually dropping.
Wow.
And I think we are seeing a new pro-life generation rising up. I do. And we've seen that obviously in the States, that's happening there. But I do think that we are going to see more and more people recognising the humanity of the unborn and being unable to justify the removal of that, the killing of that baby.
Wow. I just had a question come in via Facebook from Daniel. Hi, Daniel. Welcome. Thank you for watching. His question is, how do we have the abortion discussion in church? And how do we disciple people through this?
So we've got to have the discussion knowing that people that you're talking to, many of them will have been touched by abortion in some way. I didn't know that you've been touched personally by abortion in your wider family, Tash. It's very easy to talk to somebody thinking that they wouldn't have. We've got to assume that people will have had someone in their life, if not themselves. We've also got to come at it from the point of view that each one of us are guilty of murder, if we're going to come from what Jesus is saying. So no one has any sort of self-righteous way of approaching this. But I think we've got to come from it in the church, we come from it from two angles, and you've mentioned both of them, Tash, in that we come from it from a spiritual angle, that we are created in the image of God. God knows us in the womb. We read that in the scriptures. We read that in the Psalms, that before we're even born, he knows who we are.
Yeah.
So he has a plan for everybody's life. But we can also come from the science perspective. But I think what we've got to do in the church and outside the church too is always approach this in love. I have not been in a position where I have had to consider abortion. I've always had a husband who would support me no matter what. And even before I was married, my parents would have supported me no matter what. But there are many girls who I've met who are considering an abortion or who have had an abortion where it's almost like a suicide. It's almost like there is no other option. This is the only way forward for me. And I think we've got to come from a position of understanding their position and do everything that we can to actually help. I think too often we as Christians have given the answer without being prepared to help somebody along the way. So we're very good at saying abortion is wrong, but we're not so good at saying, I'll walk with you, I will take you to the doctor's appointments, I will help you fill out the forms to even adopt your child if that's what you decide to do. I'll go on Facebook and get you a baby crib and a pram. We're not so good at that. We're better at just saying abortion's wrong.
That's
we've got to be prepared to be part of the solution, not just give the answer.
That's absolutely right. It's so easy to talk, right? But to actually walk the walk is excruciating, because just offering advice requires no sacrifice, but to actually be the one to help is the biggest sacrifice at all. I'm just getting I'm getting another question in, but it's a good question because it's actually going to go into my next topic. And I'm sorry I spent so much on that topic. It's such a big one for me personally. Thank you so much
important.
for going down the rabbit hole with me on that one,
Yeah.
Wendy. And I'm sure we can talk about that endlessly another time. But the hot topic now, today, is racism. This is a very big thing. I didn't think how much it affected me, actually, until we were facing all of these things. My grandmother, my grandparents were immigrants from South America in the early 70s. And, they were just reading a newspaper in Argentina saying, hey, look, there's lots of jobs. And South America, parts of it are still considered a third world country. It's very difficult to live there. The poverty is extreme. But we Latino people are wonderful and we enjoy everything with food and happiness. So, it's good. But racism affects, I think, everybody. And not just racism, but prejudice. And I think that is the core of racism. It's prejudice. The hot topic of today and the protests and whether you agree with it or not, it's something that is going to come up at the barbecue. But what is your perspective and the perspective of the ACL on the protests taking place in Australia at the moment? And it's not George Floyd didn't die here, but the protests are in response to Indigenous deaths in custody. What is your response to that, Wendy?
So I think as Christians, we need to stand against all injustice, including racism, and maybe even particularly racism. And obviously today, that's just so incredibly important because, the value of every life, and we've just talked about the value of life, it's intrinsic to the values of being a Christian. That's right. And no one, not a single one, would be prepared to say or disagree that Black Lives Matter. But I think it's not right when Christians, when we're finding ourselves, not just Christians, but anybody, are finding ourselves pressured to publicly support a movement that's named Black Lives Matter. I don't think that that's right, because the Black Lives Matter movement itself is fundamentally anti-family, certainly anti-Christian. And there's a few things that I could read from their website that I have got written down in front of me about that. But I think what in Australia, what we're seeing is that this has raised the whole issue of Black lives in custody, Black deaths in custody. And this is an important issue that Australians need to consider. And again, like in the same way as I said that we approach people who have had an abortion, we need to almost walk their walk. We need to actually really walk the walk of people who are Aboriginal in our nation. And the walking that they have done, there's no doubt that there's just been horrendous stuff that has happened to our Indigenous brothers and sisters here in our nation. Absolutely horrendous. And I think we've got to start. So many governments over so many years have actually poured billions of dollars into this, into trying to fix things for the Indigenous people, into trying to bring around reconciliation, and to trying to close the gap. And we pour all this money in, but the issue continues to drag on. And one of the things that I think personally is that we haven't always faced the truth of what actually happened for our Aboriginal people not that long ago. Within 15 minutes of the very first people landing on the very first Europeans, so very first, Captain Cook, within 15 minutes, the first musket was fired. So a gun was fired at Aboriginal people within 15 minutes of the first landing. I think we've got to let that sink in and think, we sort of think of ourselves as these friendly settlers. With a gun being fired within 15 minutes of actually arriving, that sets a pretty bad stage for what was going to happen. There are numerous accounts of Aboriginal people being lured to a waterhole, women and children particularly, being lured to waterholes with the promise of food and being gunned down. Things like that we don't hear about, and it's not that long ago. The Aboriginal people didn't get the right to vote in our country until the 1960s. Women got the vote in the late 1800s. It's just like, I think some of those things we just don't think about. And in the light of the whole George Floyd and the whole, like, I just think a lot of the riots were just orchestrated thugs, honestly. But many people come from a position of deep hurt and long-standing, just an ache in their hearts. And so I think unless we recognise that, so it's not really giving an answer to what we do, but I think we've got to be prepared to accept the truth about our history and come from that position. And that's when we might be able to actually understand why some people hang on to the sadness and the bitterness and the hurt. For me, what we have to do is not just keep saying sorry. We've got to get to the stage where we can forgive and our Indigenous people can forgive. But how do you forgive when you feel like people still don't even understand what they did wrong? The thing is, you and I didn't do anything, Tash. And I think it's wrong to try and put blame or shame or any sense of responsibility on you and I. So it's very complicated, isn't it, in one way? Because on the one hand, I'm saying I want us to face up to what actually happened to Aboriginal people in our country. But I don't think that it's you and I who have to take the blame. But I do think our country has to name it and realise how horrendous some of these things that happened. And again, I'd love to include some of these links to some of these stories, because I think people need to start reading some of these stories and understanding, wow, that was like, this is up there with some of the most horrendous stuff that has happened in the history of the world. And so I think we've got to understand where people are coming from, the deep hurt, and we've got to enter into that. But the rioting and even the going against the authorities, none of that I think is helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, and I was gonna make a smart comment that being a woman of color, I'm scot free. But we are it is very cliche, but I think as God's people, um, I
You
think
tick all the boxes, Tash.
yeah, I think we have to lead from the top because it's very easy to just fob it off. We weren't there. We're not holding guns to them, and no one when Australia was colonized, no one's alive from then today. But there's something in your language that keeps coming up, and I put a finger on it, Wendy. I think the key to all of this is empathy.
Mm,
And I feel like that will unlock forgiveness and
mm,
healing and restoration and reconciliation to actually move forward. But this is a much broader topic than like you said before, not just saying sorry, actually
mm,
forgive.
mm.
Let's path a way forward together. Let's
Yeah.
do this. Is there anything on the ACL scope that is exploring legislation to open this conversation or to help our Indigenous brothers and sisters? Because for me personally, I'm unaware of the things that personally affect them, what's affecting them today, and what is the ACL doing there?
So in Western Australia, in the Pilbara region, there's a town called Roebourne. Um, it's got a reputation for all the wrong reasons. It has the highest amount of pedophilia in our country, and it's an Aboriginal community. Now, we have a church there. There's an Aboriginal church there. When I say we, I'm talking the collective us, not ACL. But we have a church there that we've been in contact with, just wanting to try and understand and hear and be part of the listening. I think we've got to listen before we can actually come up with an answer or a way forward, because I think successive governments, whatever they've been, Conservative or ALP, whichever government, they have done their very best, and they've really wanted to work towards reconciliation. But I think part of it that we've probably missed is the listening and the truth telling. Those are the two things that I think we really need. So at the moment, ACL is just engaged in a listening and seeking to tell the truth. Uh, that's what we're doing. But this town, Roebourne, is the church there is just incredibly faithful. They are a group of people who are not a large group, but they're doing amazing things. So I guess one of the things that I'm encouraging people to do as I talk to them from the point of view of the ACL is churches can partner with Aboriginal churches. Churches in the cities can partner with other churches. That's a really big help. And listen and actually engage with people who are different than you. And obviously we're talking at the moment about racism, so we're talking about people from a different ethnic background or an Aboriginal background, but not just that, not just different races, it's different people who are in a gay lifestyle, people who are coming from a completely different worldview from us. We need to start engaging and understanding where they're coming from to even get the right, I guess, to give answers and to talk into their space. So yeah, we're doing a lot of listening to the people in Roebourne, because it's been, if people Google that, they'll come up with the newspaper articles about it being the most pedophilia in Australia. Very sad. So we're wanting to actually partner there and see what we can do. See, at the moment we're praying and we're talking.
Yeah, right. That's amazing. And obviously, just gaining the respect to actually have those conversations, so your word carries weight, right? I
Yeah,
feel
and
like
just to try and understand,
yeah,
and to try and, yeah, really hear and listen. And that takes time. That's not just a quick fix either. Listening and understanding takes time.
Yeah, absolutely. It takes it takes a lot of effort and sometimes the humility to say, "Hey, look, I'm wrong or I'm ignorant to this. Can you show me what's
Yeah,
going on here?" I think
that's right.
that's really beautiful. Wendy, I don't want to talk about too many things tonight because I feel I think the things that we have spoken tonight I'll be chewing the cud for a while here as
Mm,
well. But I've just got a couple of questions coming in, if you don't mind me asking, and then
absolutely.
we can wrap up. But I would love a part two, if that's okay, Wendy. If I
I
can,
think we need chapter 2,
if
definitely.
I can steal you from Peter another night, that would be much appreciated. But I have on the racism topic had a question come in about why do you think um, in today's age that we have seen a rise in radicalism on all sides of the political spectrum, probably particularly feminism, the BLM movement, fascists. We haven't seen fascists since the 30s and 40s, but it's making a big comeback in 2020. Why do you think this is?
Well, for me, I think what it is a reaction against moving away from an understanding of God. I mean,
Wow.
I grew up. I'm 59, so I grew up in an era where all of my friends went to Sunday school. We had an understanding of God.
Yes.
People believed in God. They believed that there was somebody, there was a higher power that they were responsible to, even if they didn't have a relationship with God. And so that is in the West, right across the West, not just in Australia, but in every Western country. We've just seen a move away from an understanding of God, a move away from being responsible to anybody. And so when we move away from an understanding of truth, that there is a higher truth, we've had to make up our own truth. And so
Mm,
everybody has their own truth now. And so we're into this post-truth sort of era where everybody's truth is what they make of it, which means that there is no truth. And
that's right.
so people have their own truth, and then they feel like they've got to defend it. But somebody else might have a different truth, and so it just what we're seeing now are these more and more almost tribes arise. We've got this tribalness because everybody goes to their own leader rather than one truth that we all have. We used to have, common sense. We used to talk about common sense because there was a commonality. And
Yeah.
now we look and we see people who are have been upset by the killing of George Floyd, and so they're going and smashing the windows of people who are themselves Black Americans, and they're ruining their livelihood. They're smashing businesses that had nothing to do with this gentleman's murder. And so we think to ourselves, that doesn't even make sense. Well, it's because there's no common sense anymore, because there's no commonality in what we see of truth. I think that for me, it's a moving away from an understanding that there is one truth. There is truth. Um, yeah.
That's an amazing answer. And I'm surprised I didn't even think of that myself, but I do find comfort that um, we really need God's word because he outlines how to live and how we treat other people and how we respect other people. Um, and without even just talking tonight, I'm just having more of a value for the word of God, for how he has shown us how to live. And
Yeah.
I'm filled with hope and joy and anticipation that when he returns, he's going to bring his order back, because it's right when we're left to our own truths, which is not a truth, it's an opinion or a perspective, it's subjective. We wreak havoc, don't we? And I think
Yeah.
we have absolutely seen that in the last several weeks. And just one more question before we close. Question came in about our topic of abortion. We spent a lot of time talking about women, but what about men? How should men respond to the topic of abortion. It could be your partner or your girlfriend is thinking of having an abortion, or perhaps you've even played part in advocating for an abortion. What's your response to men in this story?
So I think men need to step up. Men need to be there. The very first words that anybody should say to anyone who says I'm pregnant should be congratulations. That's so wonderful. That's the very first thing to say. But so the man needs to step up. But I think they need to be more responsible, but they also are the victims in this, because in our age of it's my body, it's my choice, men are not getting any choice at all. They're being completely shut out of the equation. And I think that's really wrong, because this is their child as well. It's not just their child, it's their parents' grandchild. So the guy's parents are losing their grandchildren. As a grandmother, that grieves me terribly. I just hate to think that any of my grandchildren have been aborted. So the guy in the situation is a victim as well. And I want to say that that's absolutely the right thing. But in many cases, we also do find that the guy is absent, and that's often why a woman feels like she can't go on. I've had women say to me, my husband or my boyfriend or my partner left me when I was 7 months pregnant. I can't do this on my own. And you know what? That breaks my heart, but I actually understand it. I understand that feeling of I can't do this on my own, or the feeling of I've been abandoned and this child will remind me always of that guy. So there's a sense where I would say, guys, step up, but also I would say, guys, I'm sorry, because I think there's many men whose hearts have been broken because they didn't want their partner, their wife, their girlfriend to have an abortion, and it's happened anyway. The thing is, God in his graciousness promises, and this is a hard one to even get, but he promises that he will bring good for those who love him and those who are called to him. And so even in this, God can bring good, and you can be an amazing encouragement to another guy. Walk alongside another guy who's in the same situation and help them to man up, or encourage them. We can use everything that's happened to us, or everything that we've done, whether it's not our own fault or whether it's something of our own choosing. We can use that to help others, and that's what God wants us to do. But in that, he has promised that he will be able to turn even the worst thing to be a blessing, which is an amazing promise from God. Yeah.
It is. He is the giver of hope in all
Yeah.
in all things, and that's such a
Yeah.
comfort to anybody watching. There is so much hope in Jesus and what God promises to us in His Word. Wendy, we're going to wrap up, but I want to finish really strong here. Everybody who's watching and will watch, I know some people can't tap into the live stream as we do it live, but Wendy, how can we be involved right now? What is something we can do right now as we are talking that gets us into the conversation, that gets us involved? What can we do, Wendy?
Look, if you're not engaged with the ACL, I would really encourage you to do that. Just go to acl.org.au. There'll be one of those annoying things that pops up and asks you if you want to get their emails, those little pop-up things. Say yes. Get the emails. It costs nothing. And, I say to people too, it'll just be one of those emails that comes once a week. And sometimes you won't have time to look at it. Might not even be that you have time, you just don't have the inclination, you don't have the headspace. That's okay. You can just delete it this week. But one of those weeks, God will cause you to open up that email and you will read something that really makes you feel like, yes, this is something I want to be involved in. So that's the easiest way. Sign on to get the ACL emails. We let you know what's happening. We let you know if there's something you can do. At the moment, we are still running this campaign to call on our health ministers to push back on this gender fluid stuff. We see that as a huge current issue, but there's always something going on. In Queensland, we've got the election coming up in October. This is probably the most important election I can remember for many of the reasons that I've told you. but there's other reasons too. Let me know if you want me to send you more information. But so get involved in the election. Find out from me who are Christian candidates so that you can support them. We need Christian MPs in there so that when a vote happens for abortion or euthanasia or any of these other topics that we've talked about, that we have somebody in there who can vote according to what God says will make our nation flourish. So be involved in the election coming up. There's lots of ways through ACL. I really encourage you. There are other organisations, and I don't discourage people from joining them as well. But ACL is, I feel really confident with what we're doing. I've been with ACL for 10 years now. I've worked under Jim Wallace, then Lyle Shelton, and now Martin Niles. And I don't know of 3 more godly men in Australian leadership than those 3 men. I feel very blessed. So I feel very confident in encouraging you to support ACL. Yeah.
Yes, please. So if you are watching, the website there is www.acl.org.au. So even as we are speaking, why don't you go log in with another device? It's so easy. Their website is very user friendly. As a graphic designer, always like seeing that. Click on the subscribe button, please. This is the first step in as a Christian. As a Christian, this is our absolute priority, I think, getting involved in the things that affect everyone here. And you mentioned several links that you have, Wendy, and we discussed earlier that you would send them forward and we would send out a church email. But as we're speaking, what are some of the websites that, just at the top of your head, that you would encourage our viewers to have a look at for themselves?
So our federal government are currently working on a report to do something about pornography, which I absolutely love. And the name of the report is Protecting the Age of Innocence. So if you Google that, you will see a report come up. Scott Morrison is really keen to do something, and I know many governments have said they will. He's really keen. So Protecting the Age of Innocence. But if you Google things like LNP, abortion promise, you'll find out all those links as well. I just encourage you to just really look at what sort of promises the different political parties are making in the lead up to the election. Just be aware. It's easy these days. We can get the newspaper online. You can do so much. So be aware. But it's once you know, wow, you can say to one of your friends, oh, have you heard that the government have actually just put out a report? It's called Protecting the Age of Innocence. Isn't that great? It just opens up a conversation then about, where they're at with their kids as well. It's
very subtle, Wendy. Very subtle.
Yeah.
So just to reiterate for the viewers, Protecting the Age of Innocence report, you can type that into Google, and LNP, abortion, election promises, and those who are subscribed to our church email, you will receive something from us by the end of the week about all these links that you can also delve into yourself and read. Are there any events coming up in the ACL calendar that would be important for some of us to be aware of that are coming up, Wendy?
So this Saturday actually is our Tasmanian state event, state conference, and everybody's welcome to join in that. It's online, it's a Zoom conference. So when you go on the website, you'll see a registration for that. And it's just on Saturday. You can tune in while you're even doing your work around the house. So it's a free event. In August, we're having it'll be the 4th Australian Summit Against Sexual Exploitation. And that again is going to be on Zoom because of the whole COVID. So I'll keep you updated with the exact date. We're still looking at 2 dates in August. But that's a really good opportunity as well, because we have experts from around the globe who join us for that. And it's not peculiarly Christian, although the Australian Christian Lobby underwrites it. But we want to hear the voices from everybody in this area, because there's lots of other people working in this area. So that's another one that's in August. But the main events that we have for ACL have been postponed because of COVID. So there'll be a really big there'll be a big event next year. It'll probably be in Sydney, but it'll be certainly worth traveling for. But I'll keep you updated on that.
Yes, please. That'd be wonderful. Wendy, I can't thank you enough for giving us your time tonight. We are so honored, so blessed. Thank you. You made a fangirl so excited tonight. Thank you, Wendy.
Love you, darling.
And so next time, and we'll discuss a date, but part 2, these are the topics we didn't even get to tonight, people. It's so juicy what we are talking about. But the things that we're going to touch on next time is the legalization of prostitution. You would have seen this pretty much in most papers, human sex trafficking and pornography, and what our roles are in all of this, how we can be a voice. These are really big topics. I'm really looking forward to you joining us again. But Wendy, again, thank you so much. It was an honor to have you on tonight, and I'm sure everyone else was really blessed by it. So I just want to thank you, Wendy. Lovely. Well,
God
everybody,
bless you, darling.
God bless you too. Everyone here, God bless you. May the Lord keep you. May his face shine upon you and be gracious towards you. Bless you guys, bless your families, and have a wonderful week. And we will see you and speak to you shortly.